Let's move on to the raging battle over whether it is a good strategy or not a good strategy for Republicans to start impeaching judges who block or obstruct Trump's attempts openly to exert the unitary executive theory of power, meaning you're trying to take some power back, as the right would argue, from the, quote, administrative state. This is a really interesting exchange between Laura Ingraham on Fox News and Donald Trump on Fox News just last night, Tuesday night, where Ingraham pressed Donald Trump on whether he would defy court orders. That's obviously at the center, and Crystal and Sagar have covered this, of the debate over what happened with that migrant flight that was ordered by a judge to be turned around, landed in El Salvador. This was Venezuelan migrants alleged to be members of the gang Tren de Aragua, or designated by the Trump administration as a foreign terrorist organization. So Laura Ingraham pushed Trump on whether he would defy court orders. Let's take a look.
This is leading people to wonder whether there are court orders that you will defy because you believe that the judge has no jurisdiction, or they're political questions and not justiciable at all. And what would you say to that? Are there circumstances where you would defy a court order?
Well, I think that, number one, nobody's been through more courts than I have. I think nobody knows the courts any better than I have. I would say the chief judge does, but nobody knows them better than I have. And what they've done to me, I've had the worst judges. I've had crooked judges. I have judges that valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million because that benefited his case, because he wanted to see me convicted of something. I have judges that had relatives making millions and millions of dollars on the election, ruling on the election.
But going forward,
I had judges that were so corrupt.
Because we all know that was outrageous.
I never did defy a court order.
And you wouldn't in the future?
No, you can't do that. However, we have bad judges. We have very bad judges. And these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point, you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge. The judge that we're talking about, you look at his other rulings, I mean, rulings unrelated, but having to do with me, he's a lunatic.
Ingrid, by the way, was a clerk for Justice Clarence Thomas. She has a good bit of interest in some of these legal questions, but a lot of people on the right now do, Justice John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, I should say, reacted. He released a statement, a very, very rare thing. We can put the next element up on the screen. Yesterday, midday, he says, quote, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose." Now, here's how some people on the right reacted to John Roberts deciding to take that leap and actually issue a statement. This is Mike Cernovich, who said Trump has the political capital and then some to ignore judges who tell them to allow terrorist gangs to remain in the USA. It's not a close call. John Roberts lives in his D.C. media bubble and overestimates his power. It's all made up. Trump can take it away easily. Jeremy Carl, he replied, this is actually a pretty funny one, John Roberts is George Bush's worst mistake outside of the Iraq War, and he's still got time to take the lead. So this was a pretty common argument, Ryan, on X yesterday, that the Cernovich point about impeachment should be pursued by Congress. Obviously, Congress really doesn't have the votes right now. There's no way to imagine that you could go get some of these impeachments through Congress. But Trump sort of throwing cold water on it in that primetime interview with Laura Ingraham was quite interesting as well, because this was some of his loyal MAGA media defenders who spent the day saying impeachment is a perfectly reasonable, rational response here. You have Trump instead saying, nope, not going to do it. You can't do it.
And yeah, there is history on this. And that's why he's saying for more than 200 years and not for the entire history of our country. I think it was under Jefferson. Should have looked this up before we started the show. But there was a judge that, I think it was a Federalist judge, that was ticking Jefferson off, and his party tried to get rid of him and tried to impeach him. Mm. And I think he was saved by 1 vote. Mm. And that set the precedent where Congress decided, look, we're only going to impeach judges for corruption. We're not, if we don't like your ruling, we're going to appeal it and we're going to push it to a higher level. Mm-hmm. And so since then, basically no political party has ever tried to impeach a judge because they didn't like the ruling. I heard the Cernoviches of the world complaining, where was John Roberts when AOC and the rest of the Democrats were saying that they were going to pack the courts?
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, fair question. The answer is, that's not out of the realm of American historical precedent. Like FDR, that's right there in the law. Like the number of Supreme Court justices is not set by the Constitution. It's set by Congress. FDR, when he had a political fight with the Supreme Court, threatened to pack the court. There was public outrage at him. He backed down, and the court, kind of intimidated by his move, started letting a bunch of the New Deal, the Blue New Deal stuff through.
Freudian slip.
Yeah. So they let that stuff go through. And so then, all right, fine. So, but it was a push and pull of politics. It is also true that there was an effort to impeach a judge in whatever 1802 or whatever for something they disagreed with. So Republicans could try again if they won, which is what gets me to Trump. I think he's like, why are you talking about this?
Yeah.
Because you don't have 67 votes to do this.
Yeah.
It's like this Elon, it all came from Elon Musk, or it's probably a reply.
Well, he started echoing Bukele.
Bukele, like, get out of here. Like, Bukele, we're not taking constitutional advice from...
Seriously. But Musk was quote tweeting approvingly the Bukele plan to, crack down and restore democracy.
And Bukele did that, but Bukele...
Allegedly.
Bukele certainly did not invent an executive or getting rid of his independent judiciary. Like, that's like textbook. And yes, obviously, if you want to set up a dictatorship or some type of extremely powerful, like, executive, you get rid of the judiciary. Like, that doesn't take a constitutional scholar to figure out. But they don't have the votes. So his to me, the almost more interesting answer there was about, would you ignore one? Would you ignore a ruling? And he says, well, I never have.
Right.
But he doesn't say he wouldn't. On the other hand, bro, yes, you did. You just ignored one like yesterday. You're acting like, or Monday. You're acting like you were not told to not deport these guys to the El Salvadoran torture chambers.
Well,
and
that
you
was
told the judge to F off.
Well, I was gonna say, I think that was actually another interesting part of what he said, is he's maintaining, and a lot of people in MAGA world are maintaining that, and I shouldn't say MAGA world in this case, in the White House, are actually maintaining that was not done intentionally, that it just was happenstance. And so...
What's that, huh? You're breaking up, can't hear this ruling. Also, it is...
I hope that's what actually happened. He's like on Air Force One.
Can't hear it. Also, it is important to point out, Trump has named it the Gulf of America. So therefore, not international waters, right?
Interesting. Well,
lawyers, fact check that for me.
I mean, things can be called America.
If it was the Gulf of
America.
Mexico, then he might have an argument, but it's not the Gulf of Mexico anymore. It's Gulf of America. Go look up of.
They're also, but even on that, they're disputing whether or not the verbal order, I mean, it gets into insane, arcane legal questions, whether the verbal order, the time that the verbal order came out versus the time the written order came out, compare that to the flight logs and when all of the process was able to. We don't need to get into it, but...
Right, and also we have learned that, as suspected, they made some mistakes. Somebody who came in legally, was seeking asylum, just an artist, has nothing to do with this gang, is on the flight, and who knows if Bukele has tortured them since then, has killed them. To me, the people involved in this, when Bush used to do it, they would call it an extraordinary rendition. We have rules against torture. And so what Bush would do is he would send people mostly to Egypt and elsewhere and say, you torture them. Therefore, we're not torturing them. We now understand that, no, that doesn't count. Like that doesn't get around the constitutional prohibition on torture.
Well, and what you're referring to is these reports. This is one from the Miami Herald that is the Venezuelans alleged to have been gang members, Tren de Aragua, their families who have seen them in the Bukele video. Speaking of Bukele, the video that Bukele released of them getting off of the plane in El Salvador, they sort of spotted their family members and have said, they're denying, actually, that these family members have any ties whatsoever to Tren de Aragua. We can put B7 on the screen. This is getting back into the tattoo debate. This says, quote, relatives said he had several tattoos that are testaments to his love of family. One bears the name of their daughter. Another on his arm reads, Fuerte como mamá, strong like mom. A third shows 2 clasped hands representing him and his partner next to the date they began dating. But it gets into that question again, Ryan, of whether people are being swept up into these deportations because they have tattoos that are identified with Tren de Aragua, which is something we do repeatedly hear cited by the administration as reasons for those reasons for the deportations. Now,
and you've done some reporting down on the border. You've met ICE agents, right? Would you want your fate in the hands of think about the ICE agents you've met, all right? And it's a meritocracy.
Yeah.
And these are the people who wound up as ICE agents, right? Would you want your fate in their discerning hands? And the question that they have to answer, this ICE agent, who's working down in southern Texas or wherever they are, has to look at a tattoo on a Venezuelan person's back, and they have to distinguish whether that tattoo is a Tren de Aragua gang affiliated tattoo, or it is some other ink that the person found to be attractive the day they went, or like for many people, the artist just drew it because this is, you go in, you're an artist, give me what you got. So the question of whether or not you will be hooded, have your head shaved, tortured, and potentially killed in an El Salvadoran prison is going to be answered by one ICE agent looking at your tattoo and deciding whether or not that, is that enough due process, you think?
I hate that.
And how confident would you be that ICE agent is going to get it right 100% of the time?
I hate the Salvadorian involvement here. Obviously hate that there are any allegations of torture. If I were concerned about due process, I would not enter a country illegally or stay in the country illegally. And that's one of the questions that I have right now is whether these hundreds of migrants are people who were...
What if you were told, here's the process?
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
You apply for asylum.
That's what I'm wondering.
You report to this particular spot.
Yeah.
You get a number. Then you show up for court.
Yeah. That's what I'm wondering.
That's the process. You're told that's the process. That's the legal process.
Yes.
And then some ICE agent says, actually, I kind of think that tattoo might mean you're in a gang. I'm going to send you to Bukele to check out.
We were talking about this months ago. I think one of the biggest challenges or tensions in the Trump administration's deportation policy is that the United States of America under Joe Biden, unfortunately, opened up an actual legal asylum process. And that's where you end up having some roughly 8 million, according to the New York Times, new people, a net of migrants coming into the country just under the Biden administration, a huge, huge chunk of that, close to half, I would say. It's hard to actually know exactly how many, were people who came in and legally applied for the asylum process. You cross the border, you claim asylum, and Joe Biden had opened up people's ability initially when he was president. This is one of the things he cracked down on over the last year that brought immigration numbers down dramatically. So that's what I'm actually genuinely interested about with this number, these hundreds of migrants, is whether any of them were here because the Biden administration said, claim asylum. And coming out of Venezuela, the American government...
Protected status.
Oh, yeah. The
it's
American
a communist
government
that's torturing and killing, and it's the most awful government ever. Come to the United States, we'll protect you.
Right.
Literally give you temporary protected status.
Right, yes. So, and I would say the administration, I don't think this matters to most voters. From my perspective, someone who's in media, I don't think the administration has done a very good job explaining exactly what these migrants are accused of, because that distinction to me is really, really important, whether they crossed the border illegally, stayed illegally, and then committed various crimes, didn't even show up for asylum hearings. That could be reason enough in my book to deport people if you're obstructing the process that you're benefiting from, all of those things. That's what I'm curious about. So I don't think the administration has done a particularly good job. There's a hubris because they know the public is completely on their side about deporting military-aged men who came to the country and are tatted up. And likely, I think Crystal mentioned this the other day, if there's several hundred, as her estimate the estimate she cited said several hundred Tren de Aragua members in the United States. That's a significant gang cell spread out throughout the country. It's not millions, but that's a significant gang cell spread throughout the country that people want to get the hell out of the United States of America. So I think because the administration knows the American people are rightfully supportive of that, they aren't really eager to pony up the evidence.
And the problem for me is that on the right, there's this recognition that the government is inherently incompetent and fallible.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
Anybody who's gone to the DMV, you show up at a Social Security office if it's still open.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks dealing with the government. They lose stuff. They lose stuff on purpose. They say they're open and they're not open. Like, there's a lot of legitimate criticisms that people have of the government from their immediate interactions with them.
Right.
Yet, and this is why I'm making fun of the intellectual capacity of these ICE agents, yet we expect then the government to be infallible when it's picking up a Venezuelan off the street, and to be certain that they're not grabbing a citizen, not grabbing a green card holder, they're not grabbing somebody who legitimately and legally applied for asylum and has a case that is still being adjudicated.
Yep.
We know that in Chicago, they picked up a brown guy who turned out to be an American citizen, and he spent the entire night in detention.
Well, they botched the Khalil arrest.
Right.
Clearly,
They showed up.
They
showed up, arrested Khalil, thinking that he had a student visa, telling him they were revoking. This is a Columbia protester thing that they were telling him that they were revoking his student visa. And his lawyer's like, "Bro, he has a green card," and they're like, "Well, we're revoking that too." Like, they didn't even know.
Yeah.
So you want to enable these morons with this unchecked power. Like, the point of due process from the right is you don't trust the government. Like, you think they might make mistakes, and so you want to check, because sometimes you can't get a do-over. Like, if you accidentally, as they appear to have done, I'm using accident very generously to them, accidentally send people who are here legally and going through the correct process, and you send them to a torture chamber and they're tortured, there's no do-over. You can't undo that. You've destroyed that person. Well, and maybe they get killed.
And maybe there are actually legal avenues they can pursue. Depends, but
I don't know.
see.
If they didn't have jurisdiction over the Gulf of America, how do they have jurisdiction from this dungeon?
The due process question is an interesting one, because as long as you've established people are not in the country legally.
But that's the thing. Do we trust that they even establish
to establish that? That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I haven't seen enough, frankly, from the White House to just trust that they established that, especially, frankly, after the Khalil arrest, where they did not know. Yeah. There's the report of them on the phone. This is a report from his wife, who can hear them on the phone being like, "Oh, okay, we'll take him in anyway." Like, that's the exact word, anyway. So, no, I mean, I don't have a ton of trust in the government. This is why I always say the most hillbilly thing that J.D. Vance has ever said is that he hates the cops.
Yes.
Right? He apologized for it, but it was like an old post of his.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I also think it's fairly important to get a hold of the 8 million people, and that's going to make for some really unfortunate and sad and heart-wrenching stories. But, these, if people are legitimately members of Tren de Aragua, the government should make that very clear. They should show what their evidence is. Otherwise, it's like you're just throwing people to El Salvador. So I don't.
That was a very real moment from J.D. Vance, because that is one of the key divides, is of where you are in basically a social class. Is when you see a cop.
Yeah.
Do you get scared?
Yep.
Do you not care, or do you feel more comfortable?
Yep.
And the immediate feeling that you get puts you in a very particular place. And for J.D. Vance to understand that, he should then understand that when you see that cop should not have the unilateral power to pick you up, hood you, and send you to El Salvador to be tortured, and then figure out later whether or not they did it right.
I think Sagar was getting at this the other day, but I think one of the tough things here is I care significantly more about the fact that Joe Biden let in 8 million migrants than I do about, and that's not to say I don't care about both. I think you can care about
Saagar
both.
made that point too. I don't understand that point. It's like, okay, you can hate that, but like, it is what it is. Like now here we are. Do we have, are we a country of civil liberties and constitutional protections or not? The part that kills me, like, is all the problems I have with the United States, at least we have these civil liberties. That's always the thing that has separated us from the rest of the world. The First Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, all of these different protections that we have against tyranny. We don't get universal health care.
Yeah.
We don't get a decent minimum wage.
Yeah.
We have complete total economic precarity. But at least we have these other things. If we don't get that, then just give us China. Like just give us some economic security then if we're going to live in a totalitarian government without any individual freedoms.
I think the point Saagar was
We're going to get
making
neither?
about the left broadly, not about you and Crystal, is that sometimes it feels like concern trolling, that after 8 million plus people come in illegally, you have case studies like Lake and Riley, and the left is most angry. I'm not saying this about you, but like that's what I think people are reacting to. The left is furious about potential, likely illegal immigrants not getting due process.
Right, the left gets angry about different things than the right. Like that shouldn't be news to people.
But part of our civil liberties are based on having the rule of law. And as soon as you start eroding the rule of law and letting people hide out in sanctuary cities over the course of years, that's a significant threat to civil liberties of Americans, a significant threat to Lake and Riley and to other people who have found themselves in the crosshairs of this. So, that is legitimately tough for me. I think it is possible to care about both. I do care about, genuinely care about, not disappearing people into a Salvadorian prison. I also...
you can't put these guys in front of a judge and be like, here's how we know they're part of a gang.
Or at least put the evidence out. Like let the public know how you know that.
Yeah, preferably before you send them to the dungeon.
Yeah. Well, just don't send them to El Salvador for it's a stupid political stunt.
Can't do that.
It's a stupid stunt.
Yeah.
It's just, yes, I don't disagree with that at all. Well, I guess we found some common ground.
There we go.
Against Bukele.
No extraordinary renditions to torture chambers. All right.
So let's stop fueling the Bukele PR stunts. That would be great. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.